Be me. 2 years ago. Live in Labrador, which is one of the most remote, unpopulated inner-woods parts of North America. An area larger than Germany, but with less than 30,000 people living in it. Get devastating news that my grandmother passed away. Was really close to her. Can't fly to Newfoundland for her funeral. Had to drive out by myself the 2,000 kilometer, 1,250 miles journey across the Trans-Labrador Highway. One of the most remote, rarely traveled major roads in North America. Not shitting you. It's so remote, you'd probably be the only human being within 100 kilometers, 60 miles, for most of the journey, and you could go hours without seeing another car. Roughly 2 a.m. in the morning. Can barely keep my eyes open. Promise myself I'll stop and sleep at the nearest truck stop, which up here had just tiny little pullovers. No buildings or lights or signs or anything. Pull into the next one, on the edge of a steep decline with a small stream at the bottom. Notice there's a motorcycle parked there, standing up with not a single person in sight. Huh? The owner's probably camping in the woods, don't care. I'm a naturally paranoid fucker anyways, so sleep with my doors locked and windows covered. Wake up at around 10 in the morning. Motorcycle is still there, no signs of anybody. Step outside to take a piss and get a better look over the decline at the stream in the daylight. There's a full pair of clothes and a motorcycle helmet just scattered all over the edge of the stream, and a helmet. A cooler that's been open and flung around with its contents, drinks and food tossed around. Curiosity gets the better of me, and I carefully scale down the steep decline and look around. The stream passes under the road for a culvert, which is only just a few feet from the scene. Smell a rusty, metallic stench coming from the culvert. Already uneasy from reading X screen text. Have no plans to enter the culvert, but curiosity gets the best of me. I'm just going to go by the entrance, whip out my phone flashlight and peek inside, nothing more. Sound of the stream in the metal culvert is echoing and reverberating really loudly as I approach. Fully expecting to see a dead body in there. Probably the motorcyclist who fell in. Get to the entrance. Shine my light in. I shit you not. Standing in there, hunched over, was this thing that looked like a cross between a bear and gorilla, with a distinct humanoid shape, with its mouth wide open, its canines and eyes shining from the light of my flashlight, reflecting on them. Nope. Stumble backwards away from the culvert and nearly fall over. Clamber up the steep incline on all fours. Can hear the frantic sloshing of the thing in the culvert, like it's fighting against the current to get to me. Get back to car. Speed off. Inform the police in next town along the way about the motorcycle and fucked up campsite and potential missing person, and describe as best as I could the creature I saw in the culvert. Police say they'll investigate, but I never really got any closure myself since I continued my drive to my grandmother's funeral immediately after that. I would like to share with you a story that happened to me a few years ago. I did not tell anyone about it because for a long time, I didn't know what happened at the time. But in retrospect, besides the fact that describing it again makes me feel anxious, I think it's funny. Also, strangest paranormal situations. Be 21 years old med student. Meet a girl on the internet. 10 out of 10, funny and intelligent. She tells you several times that she sees and hears various things. Voices and strange figures, especially at night. Say, from what you know about your studies, it sounds suspiciously schizophrenic. I was interested in psychiatry then. Ignore it and comfort her. Crazy but hot.exe. After some time, she starts to spend the nights at your place. One time wake up next to her. Be after a few weeks of exams and suffer from lack of sleep because of it. Sense that strange feeling of presence, that kind of feeling that makes you run to the toilet at night and sprint back to bed. 100 times stronger. Realize that she is not sleeping, just whispering something to herself. Half sleeping, you only feel a boner from a full bladder. You get up to go to the toilet. You fight any urge to run. You want to look manly. You quickly go to the toilet. You return and want to lie down. Still not awake. She looks at you with the biggest possible expression of horror, half sitting on the bed. Oh, sorry, I forgot to close the door. She has to sleep with the door closed, or she won't fall asleep. You turn around and walk to the door. on the way you kick/touch something with your foot. You don't return your attention to it because you are very messy and often kick things lying on the ground in the dark because you leave everything there. Still sleepy, you wonder what you kicked and, returning after closing the door, you look at what is lying on the ground. With eyes accustomed to the dark, you see that there is nothing lying on the ground. No dumbbells, shoes, slippers, or your laptop bag. You realize that you thoroughly cleaned everything yesterday, and there was no chance of you kicking anything. Stop at the spot where you kicked it. I always walk the same routes around the room, so I more or less knew that it was something at the front of the closet mirror. Nothing there. In each direction, almost a meter of carpet, free of anything. Remember that this thing probably moved when you kicked it and ran your foot over it, and the rustle you heard was not a bag sliding across the carpet, but more like someone taking a step back, as if someone moved his shoe on a carpet. Sense that something is very wrong. On the bed, she continues to look frightened, only this time, she is looking more to the side of you, as if someone is standing next to me. You ask in a sleepy voice, "What's going on?" "Nothing, just come back to bed." Look out of the corner of your eye in the mirror. There is no one next to you. Only thing you can come up with is coming back to bed. Go back to bed. Cover yourself very carefully and lie staring at the wall for at least a few hours until the feeling of presence passes. In the morning she is visibly frightened for the first time she slept at my place. She don't want to talk about it. She never stayed the night again. Asks, what could happen there? Did I really kick some higher being in the foot? Gotta give some context for the story. Used to live out in rural Missouri, about 30 to 40 miles west of STL. Every night around 10 to 11 p.m. every night, a Chinook helicopter would fly over the area, including my house, heading west, probably heading towards the Missouri Army National Guard base in Jefferson City or Fort Leonard Wood, which are 60 and 95 miles from where it passes over my house. Happened every night, so I was just kinda used to it flying over. Tried taking pictures of it a few times. 2017, playing Fallout 4, just hit 3 a.m. While playing, hear the helicopter pass over. Don't think too much of it. Around 5 minutes pass. I hear the helicopter fly back over. Immediately weird to me. Never flown over twice in one night. Look out the window. Helicopter is flying much lower to the ground. It's got its spotlight on, looking in the field of my neighbor's property. Cattle farmer with a lot of land. Circles around my property and my neighbor's property. Shines the light in a bunch of trees in the area. Few minutes pass and it takes off back west. Start thinking what the fuck could they possibly be looking for out there. Another 5 minutes pass of nothing. Few minutes later it flies back over. Same thing, hovering low, spotlight on. Afraid to stand near the window because they definitely have infrared. Fully expecting a hail of bullets to gun me down from a machine gun if I get too close. Even more terrified of what the fuck could be out there that they are looking for. Helicopter hovering around, looking for another 10 minutes. Flies off west again. Comes back 5 minutes later. This time, it's got its searchlight on my house and property, looking all in the trees and around tall grass. I stand right next to the window to try to see where the helicopter is at. A spotlight shines directly on me through the window. I freeze. Right after, helicopter turns around and flies back west and didn't come back for the night. Be me, 21, an edgy dumb young jackass, 2002. Sitting out on the back porch of my house with GF, sister, my equally edgy buddy Chuck, and his goth GF Sarah. We're smoking, drinking, blasting obnoxiously loud music of the time, such as Saliva, Disturbed, Godsmack, and Nickelback. The house I lived in at the time was pretty far in the woods. House, however, if you trek far enough, is home to a closed-off private landing strip, so planes are very common. Sarah goes inside to use the bathroom. We're chilling, when Paul notices something up in the sky. "Anon, come check this out," says Paul. I do check it out. Think it's a plane at first, but it takes me pretty quick to realize that this is no plane. It gives off this blue-green glow, is entirely silent, and is stationary. GF, sister, Paul and I all stare at this fucking thing. First time I ever saw a UFO. It disappears after a few seconds. A few minutes go by. Sarah is still yet to come out. Sister volunteers to see if she's okay. A few moments later, my sister comes out saying she's not in the bathroom. We comb over the house. No Sarah. Go to see if her car is still in the driveway. It is. We all decide to comb over the rest of the property to find her. No sign of Sarah. No clue where she'd gone to. Try to see if the cell she had could be reached. Dial it. On the other end there's this distorted, crackling noise. It continues till we hang up. Try and call again. We hear it again, but there's also this faint echo of a scream. It sounds like it might be Sarah. Too gargled and distorted to truly tell though. 3 to 4 hours go by. We continue to search the woods some more. By the time we've given up and are ready to call 911, there she is. It's Sarah. She's huddled up in the corner of the living room. We tried to gauge her for where she was, but she won't answer. Girl is terrified, but won't talk. Hey X, I'm not from here. I'm a mutant who only comes here for the occasional creepypasta thread. I'm not too into the paranormal and have never believed in ghosts or aliens or any of that sort of stuff. I live in Oak Park, just outside of Chicago, Illinois. See, we have an ordinance here where you're not allowed to put up a for sale sign in front of a house. So many homes are vacant here that they'd be absolutely everywhere if we could put them up. So in order to ensure that people want to live here, we make it so it doesn't look like nobody wants to live here. Thus, no for sale signs. I live alone with my pet cat, an all-black cat, which I found out recently is a rarity. His name is Calvin. He was the runt of the litter. This isn't really important. The story all started about 2 months ago. That's when I first got up late at night after a bad dream and went out for a cigarette and saw that my neighbor from directly across the street was sitting in front of his large, bright television which was facing right out his window at my house. I did not think anything of it. As days went on, I kept looking out my window and seeing my neighbor just sitting there, watching TV. After 2 weeks, I came to the conclusion that he could very well be dead. It just didn't make sense that he was just sitting there, TV on, not leaving the couch for weeks. I could only see the back of his head, and he very well may have moved while I was at work, but knowing it was there, the light of his television kept me up at night, and for hours on end there would just be no movement. I came to the conclusion that I should call the police to ask if they could check up on my neighbor. I did not know him very well. We met twice. He was an older guy. I used to see him shoveling snow or raking leaves, and I would offer to help, and he said no both times. He was a fairly active guy for his age, and it didn't add up that he would just sit there for days watching TV and not leaving his house. So, I called the police and told them, and they offered to check it out. I saw them pull up and could not help but watch. I was very curious, and even though I thought that all that would happen was they'd call up an ambulance and remove my neighbor's dead body or something, not something I'd usually be extremely interested in watching, I had grown so curious about what was going on over there that I could not settle for the simple answer that my neighbor simply died in front of his television. After knocking a few times, I saw them open up the front door and walk in. I looked around. One of them left in the living room, so I could not see where he had gone. I could only see the one room where my neighbor's windows were. The one officer turned off the television and also left my sight. They both left and drove off. About 20 minutes later, I get a call explaining that the house was empty and that my neighbor had moved out. They said a real estate agent had probably just accidentally left the television on. I went onto a few real estate websites, and, as it were, the house was indeed for sale. Anticlimactic, but at least it was a far less morbid conclusion than I had expected. I was sort of embarrassed that my mind had immediately gone to death when it really was so bland and simple, and I felt like a pretty bad person for actually feeling a slight sense of disappointment when I found out that my neighbor had not died, as I had assumed. That was a reasonable answer, a totally logical one. I had no way of knowing without the real estate signs up front, and I had no reason to question it. My neighbor had moved out, plain and simple. When I went to bed that night, it had pretty much entirely left my head. My bedroom window faces out towards my neighbor's house. For the last 2 weeks, I had been watching the television from my bed. It was how I went to sleep, just confusedly staring in wonder, slightly disturbed, knowing I could be looking at the back of the head of my dead neighbor. And since I had been staring at that television for the last 2 weeks, It took me a few minutes to register the horror when I crawled into bed and looked at the television, still on, across the street. I did not sleep very well. Every night, for about a month and a half, I'd just see that television. During the day, it was on. I'd walk up to the house when I was feeling more adventurous and knock on the door, but nobody answered. I started smoking quite a bit in lieu of proper sleep. Every night, I'd walk by the house, curious, scared, and confused. I contacted the realtor and asked if they were giving tours, and she said they were not, so it did not get turned on during some open house. I thought maybe I was hallucinating, that the television was never on, but the officer definitely went over and turned it off, so it had absolutely been on, at least in the first place. I invited a friend over 2 weeks ago, and after a little hanging out, I told him the story and asked, straight-faced and horrified, if the television was on. He said that it was. He was clearly concerned for my health, and I do not blame him. So, the only other option I could think of was maybe a squatter had taken up residence in the vacant house. It wasn't common in the area, as far as I knew. There is very little crime or homelessness in the suburban area I live in, so it didn't really make any sense for somebody to squat here, but it was all I could think of. Last night, I worked up the courage to confront the squatter. I was going to call the police, but assuming the squatter had been there when I first called, I doubted it would do anything to tell them again. I worked it out in my head that as long as somebody else was living in that house illegally, it wasn't so bad for me to walk over and enter uninvited myself. Stupidly, I worked up this courage while smoking a cigarette late at night, where the only light out was the light pollution over to the east in Chicago and the dim light of the street lamps. Shaking, both from the terrible cold weather we've been having lately and from nervousness taking over, I opened up the door. I was hoping the door was locked so I could back down on my sudden new wave of courage and walk away without feeling like I was just running off with my tail between my legs. To my surprise and dismay, the door was not locked. I felt briefly confused, wondering why the realtor had not put in a lock like they did when I sold my house. But I realized that if there was somebody squatting here, then it should not come as a surprise that there wasn't exactly airtight security. Slowly, timidly, I walked towards the living room. I could hear the faint murmur of infomercials and see the moving lights and colors of the screen shine as I tiptoed, trying to make as little noise as possible. My whole body went cold as I entered the room. There was my squatter, a middle-aged woman, wrinkly, gray-haired, and dressed like a homeless person. It at least added up. I was more horrified of the fact that I had to now confront them than at the woman herself. I stuttered a scared hello, and she looked at me, and before I could form a thought, she screamed the most hellish, horrifying scream I've ever heard. It was not the scream of a middle-aged woman. It was demonic, deep, and ear-splitting. I froze up, and my heart sank, and my eyes widened, and I stared, accepting that I was going to die, at this screaming woman for what seemed like an eternity. It was an unwavering scream. It did not sound like she was losing her breath after what had to have been a whole minute. The moment the initial wave of shock wore off, I just turned and ran. She had not moved, save for turning to look at me as she screamed, and I looked to make sure she had not gotten up to follow me out, and she had not. I ran back to my house. I considered calling the police, but I did not want to explain the situation or risk getting myself into legal trouble for trespassing on my neighbor's property. And if they went there and again did not find the squatter there was no question at all that I would have been seen as completely insane. I lay awake, refusing to look across the street at the television screen, and my thoughts raced. Surely, it had to have just been a squatter. She looked like one. She was clearly living in a house that was not hers. She was probably a mentally unstable, homeless woman. I decided that the scream could not have been as awful as I had thought. It was all just the makings of a scared mind. I actually managed to get some sleep, shockingly enough, and when I woke up, I briefly didn't even remember what had happened the night before. What I woke up to was somewhat odd. My cat always sleeps downstairs in the living room on the sofa, but I found him, wide awake, sitting on my bed cleaning himself. In all my years living here, I never woke up with him in my room. I pet him for a little and went downstairs. As I began remembering the events of the previous night, I decided to go out for a cigarette, and on my way out, I found that my front door had been unlocked. I ran through last night in my head, and I remembered vividly my frantic run home, ending in me making sure that all of my doors were locked tight. My memory is very rarely faulty. I felt my stomach churn and my heart sink, and I felt a chill as I walked back upstairs to go to my living room. What I found would have been entirely mundane in any other setting. My television set was on. I called the police to explain the situation. I called out of work and am spending the next few days in my friend's home with my laptop and my cat. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Be me, 13 years old, on summer vacation in southern Illinois. Happy to see my friends again. Me, my brother, and two of our friends hanging out. Decide to walk to an old railroad bridge. It's about 5 miles away from my grandparents' house. Leave after lunchtime, so about 1 p.m. Cutting up and having fun. Walking down decommissioned railroad tracks. Perfect summer day. Swim. Throw rocks at frogs. Usual kid stuff. It starts getting late. The rule is to be home before the sun touches the trees. Start walking back. The tracks are in the middle of nowhere. They are so overgrown you could not drive down them. Start hearing a weird noise, like radio static. The youngest guy with us starts complaining of a headache. Tell him that we will be home soon. Static gets steadily louder. Now my brother has a headache. Keep going home. Starting to freak out. Static is now deafening. All of us are in pain. The youngest passes out. We all turn to pick him up. Turn back around. It's standing in the middle of the tracks. Static now unbearable. All that I remember about what we saw was that it was large, brown, and had big yellow eyes. I remember falling down. Wake up. It's now pitch black. Normal nature sounds. Brother and two friends wake up. We fumble our way down the tracks in the dark. Make it back to my grandparents' house. Every cop car in the county is outside. We are so scared that we don't even care. Run inside the house. Family freaks out. It's now about 3 in the morning. We have no memory and cannot account for a single second of time after about 6:30 p.m. Be me, 8 years old, visiting family in Sri Lanka. We're driving to Colombo in the dead of night. Have to travel through a forest to get there. Suddenly, my uncle stops the car and turns off the lights. My dad asks him what's up, and he whispers something back in Tamil. Dad's face freezes. I vividly remember his eyes widen in terror. I ask what's up. I'm told that it's a bull elephant in must, and that driving past it might drive it to attack. I could tell that it was a lie. My dad is a dreadful liar. That and it was pitch black. How could they tell it was a must? The two men debate about what to do for a few minutes. I was born in the West, so I can't speak Tamil. I could only tell that my father and my uncle were getting increasingly frantic. Uncle finally panics and slams the pedal. We set off at a breakneck pace. My dad tries to pull me away from the window, but I was too keen on seeing the elephant. I look to the rear, and I see something that appears to be running behind us. It's nowhere near the size of an elephant. It looked and ran somewhat like a man. I could not see clearly at all, but if I did not know better, I'd have thought it was a bearded man in a strange, flowing coat. Hear a strange grating sound, but it's almost drowned out by the sound of the engine. I tell my dad that there was a man there, and that he must have been running away from the elephant. Dad does not even answer. He hurriedly says something to my uncle, and my uncle responds with what I know to be the Tamil equivalent of, "Oh my God." Spend the next few days at the temple, where my uncle makes sure that various pujas are performed for my safety and prosperity. My dad denies it whenever I bring it up, but I know what I saw that day. It's haunted me ever since. My uncle was a werewolf. Hello. This is my first time posting here, so I'm sorry if I'm doing things wrong. My girlfriend and I recently visited my family in Oregon. She had not met my parents yet, and we both wanted a break from the city, so we decided why not. Let's have some fun in the country. My parents offered to let us stay in their guest house on Mount Hood. I declined and suggested to my girlfriend we stay in a hotel instead. She is a fan of the paranormal, and I knew she'd enjoy a stay in my hometown's famously haunted hotel. In fact, you can thank her for this post. She convinced me to tell my story here. To my surprise, she wanted to stay in the family's guest house. I told her I'd rather we didn't, and when she pressed as to why, I cobbled together some poor excuse about mountain lion problems on the property. A week had gone by, and my girlfriend still wanted to make this trip. My parents understood my reservations with the guest house, but felt I should grow up and get over the issues I had with the place. If we would be staying in the guest house, I had to come clean to my girlfriend about it. So on the drive to Oregon, I told her about the summer my family spent in the guest house, trying to cure my uncle of lycanthropy. I hope this story is relevant to this board and your interests. On June 19th, my parents received a phone call in the middle of the night. They came into my room, woke me, dressed me, and loaded me in the back of the car. They told me my Uncle Red would be in town, and that we'd be spending the summer camping. My parents' house is roughly a 45-minute drive along Highway 45 to their guest house on Mount Hood. The guest house is what it's called now, but it had been the home my grandparents lived in and raised their kids in. They left the house to their kids, who shared it amongst themselves in the form of a guest/vacation home for family members visiting from out of state, or for anyone who wanted to spend a weekend at Timberline Lodge skiing. I had fallen asleep on the drive to the house, but woke up to my aunt, not Red's wife, he was single, opening the door and unbuckling me. My two other uncles sat on the front steps, both smoking and animated while they talked to my parents. My aunt led me past them and around to the back French doors, which opened into the kitchen. The doors to the family room had been closed and chained. From inside, I could hear people yelling and the cries of my uncle while he pleaded for help. His voice cracked. He stuttered and choked while he cried for someone to do something. My aunt locked us in one of the upstairs rooms, along with two of her kids, who sat in the corner of the room by the fireplace crying. My aunt reassured us that everything would be okay, that Uncle Red is just sick and he'd be better tomorrow. The sounds of my uncle screaming and crying kept us awake all night. We finally fell asleep once the sun came up. I did not sleep for long. I woke up to an empty room and the smell of breakfast and the sounds of my family talking downstairs. I got out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. I felt like I had awakened from a bad dream, like the sounds from last night had not happened at all. My family sat around the table laughing and eating, and I mean everyone. Uncle Red leaned against the island, drinking his coffee and talking with my dad. I had no idea what happened. Tired and confused by the situation, I broke down and cried. My mom scooped me up and carried me back upstairs. Lycanthropy means different things to different people, but to me, it meant that once a month, my uncle would get sick, and sometimes he would be so sick, my family needed to chain him to a post so he would not hurt himself or anyone else. My mom took me upstairs and explained this to me in a more child-friendly manner. She sat me down and established the rules of the house. These rules only applied at night. Once the sun started to set, the kids had to be brought inside and taken upstairs. We were to keep the bedroom door locked, but should open it for anyone other than Uncle Red. Don't go outside unsupervised, and no matter how much Uncle Red begs, we must not unchain him from the post. Not every night would be the same for Red. Some nights, I'd wake up to the sounds of him screaming and howling, the panicked yells of my uncles and my parents. Other nights would be quiet and peaceful. None of us knew what would trigger the urges in him, and I don't honestly think he knew either. For the most part, I don't think he remembered much of what happened when the wolf brain took over. But once, he described the pre-blackout feeling to my mom being a bubbling sensation. I feel bad now thinking back on the situation because we would avoid talking or looking at Uncle Red. He scared us, and neither my cousins nor I knew how to process our feelings about him. Until that summer, a visit from Uncle Red meant fishing trips, hiking, fun in the great outdoors, but things had changed, and Uncle Red knew that. The longer we stayed in the guest house, the more withdrawn from us he'd become. I don't think we realized the true effects that this would have on him until the 4th of July. The 4th of July would be the first night we'd stay out past sundown. My Uncle Dan had made a supply run into town and brought back fireworks. Nothing big or showy, small ones. Uncle Red spent most of the day to himself, assuring everyone he felt fine, better than he'd ever felt since he got here. Night came, and Uncle Dan got out the fireworks. We had polished off a pack of Whistling Pete's when my aunt lost sight of Uncle Red. While everyone had been preoccupied, he managed to slip off into the woods. My aunt gathered my cousins and I together while everyone else searched for him. My aunt led us into the house, through the front door, and towards the stairway. Uncle Red had come in through the back French doors, hunched over, pawing at his head. We ran upstairs and locked the door behind us. Huddled in the corner of my aunt's bed, we listened to Uncle Red scratch at the door. He would mumble and groan before he would slam himself against the door. His moans and whimpers devolved into screams. The rest of the family heard the sounds and rushed inside. Soon, Uncle Red was detained and tied back to his post. I left the house the next day. My parents sent me to stay with some friends who had moved out of town, and I was not to talk to anyone about my time in the guest house. I have not seen Uncle Red since then, and to be honest with you, I have no interest. I think the wolf in Uncle Red's brain meant to eat us that night. My girlfriend and I stayed in that house, and so much time had passed, I barely recognized the place. The family had redecorated the whole house and had begun renting it out to skiers. I still don't know how to feel about my experience, but writing this out has helped me process things better. I hope that wherever my uncle is, he is safe and protected.